Hello everyone and welcome to Tackling the 8th grade STAAR reading test. Today in this video we will briefly review some test taking strategies you can use to maximize the 4 hours you have to take this reading test. So let's get started. When you get your test, it'll look something like this. And when you keep flipping through your booklet, you will see the heading Reading because you are taking a reading test. But let's talk a little bit about what that means. So I want to look at an example passage with you. So the first one is A Ribbon for Baldy. Okay, now this story is set in the 1920s. It has a narrator, characters, a setting, which is a farm. So those clues are going to help me figure out that this is a fictional story. So the first thing I did was identify what I'm reading. I'm reading a story, so I need to be looking for certain things because on the test, each passage you get may be a different genre. And by genre, I mean it could be fiction, it could be expository, it could be a persuasive essay or speech, it could be a poem, it could be a section from a play or a drama. So you really don't know what you're going to get. So it's important to read carefully and figure out what genre you are studying. So after I've determined what I'm going to be reading, I need to be looking for certain things. For example, if I read a fiction piece, I might look for, let's look at some of the questions, things like point of view. I might be asked some vocabulary questions. So in this case, I have a definition from the dictionary. So on a question like this, I don't have to use my dictionary that's provided for me because on the STAAR test, I've already received the definition. So be careful in situations like this to not get confused by what's in your dictionary versus what is actually on the test. So if you already have a definition, use that one. You might look for something about the narrator. In this question, you're going to look at text evidence right here, imagery, choices made by the writer, things like that. Now let's look at this one. First of all, I see the term theme, so I know I'm going to have to think about theme and what is really the deeper meaning behind the story. But I also have some tough vocabulary words, diligence, sincerity, modesty. So I may not know what those words mean. So if I don't, I have to use my dictionary. So this would be a great question to pull out my dictionary and look up all of those words before I make a decision. So as you can see, fiction, you're going to be looking at some literary elements, similes, imagery, characters choices, theme, things like that. So keep that in mind if you see a fiction piece. Now this one, Can Writers Predict the Future, is actually an expository piece because it's informational, right? And a lot of times expository pieces are going to have lots of like dates, names, graphics, things like that. So if you see pictures or something similar, think about reading it as an expository text, meaning it's going to have some kind of thesis statement, but then it's also going to have support for it, information. So this one talks all about different travels to outer space. Now, there's something specific I want you to notice about this passage and the one after it. There are no multiple choice questions between this passage, Can Writers Predict the Future, and this poem, Post Early for Space. So as a good reader, that tells me these two passages are going to be my two paired selections. And all that means is the multiple choice questions are going to ask you to make connections between the two passages. So if you come to two stories or poems, whatever it is that they give you, you have to make sure you know that they are paired together because later on you're going to be asked in the multiple choice to pair them together. So when you're flipping through your test booklet, look and see which two texts are going to be paired. So as you read, you can make connections on your own before you get to the multiple choice. So I know these two are going to be paired. So as I read them, I'm going to make some connections on my own. So if I keep going, the multiple choice questions are going to be split up. For example, I'm only supposed to use Can Writers Predict the Future to answer these questions. And because it's informational, I'm going to be asked about things like a summary, I might be asked to infer things based on the information about what the writer thinks. So I'm going to have to make some inferences. And then for these questions, I'm only supposed to use the poem post early for space. So poetry, remember, you might have to analyze specific lines. You might have to talk about what a stanza is. You might need to understand some of the vocabulary, wayfarers, spacefarers. Again, some difficult vocabulary, so a great time to use your dictionary. Again, making some inferences. What does the poem suggest? So if you see something like this, what does the poem suggest about the speaker? Or any type of suggest question, let me give you a strategy. If it's an inference question, you need to go back to the text. If you cannot prove the answer with evidence from the text, then it is not the right answer. So just make sure if it's a question about what the poem suggests or what can we gain from the passage, what does the author feel in the passage, you have to support your answer with evidence. You don't actually have to write the evidence, but you've got to go back to the text and look. So if the text is not provided for you, for example, in this box, I don't have to go back because the lines are right here. But this one doesn't give me any lines from the poem, so I have to, as a good reader, go back and look it up. So one more time, if it's an inference question, the poem suggests about the speaker, doesn't say that specifically in the poem, I have to figure that out. So I'm going to go back and look it up. Okay, and then in these questions, I'm supposed to use both passages. So that's listed in this box here. So please make sure for every passage you read the directions. This box will tell you which passage or passages in this case to use. So now I have to make some connections. So here I'm asked how they are different. Here I might be asked what they might most likely agree on. How could they be similar? And again, one difference between the two. So here I'm really looking at how they could be the same and how they are different. So those are things you can think about as you're reading. And let's scroll down and look at the next one. This is another informational article, so I know I'm going to read it for its details, right? I'm probably going to have to summarize it. So as I read, I need to be pulling out those main ideas. So I'm going to read through it. And again, I see an image here, so again, that might alert me that it's going to be some type of informational text, in this case, expository. So just remember, identify what it is that you're reading. The genres are going to change throughout the test. Notice we've already had a fictional story, we've had expository, we've had poetry. So please read each passage thoroughly. If you need to take a break after a passage, that's fine, but don't stop in the middle. Once you started reading a poem, read the whole poem. Get the whole gist of it. Don't stop in the middle. Okay, and that way your brain is focusing on just that one genre. And then you can take a break before you move on to the next one. But invest in each passage one at a time. Okay, just a few more genres to talk about and then we'll be finished. This example is literary nonfiction. Now, instead of thinking of it that way, relate it to something that you're familiar with, like a narrative essay. Remember, a narrative essay is about an experience that you had that was meaningful to you. So when you read something like this, it's going to sound kind of like a narrative. It'll have that first person, I'd had a great day catching my limit of red snapper, but it's really going to be about a moment. In this case, it was about a dad chasing crabs with his daughter. But it was really meaningful to him because it represented something special that they did together. So you have to look for deeper meaning if you get a narrative like this, because it's not going to be just about the literal meaning. It's also going to have a bigger meaning. So if you see something that looks kind of like a narrative essay, I want you to be thinking about bigger meaning. So some of the questions you might see. The author includes the detailed description of the ghost crabs most likely to, so you might have to be picking out some details. Usually narrative essays are very detailed. You might be asked to write a summary or choose a summary. Things like that. And again, inferencing questions. So remember what we talked about before. Inferencing questions equal go back to the text. One more I want to look at with you, and that's this one, Sneaky Supermarket Spies. And the only thing I want to point out on this one is it has lots of text features. And by features, I mean bold headings, information in a separate box, more bold headings, images, all of that. So this one is most definitely going to be an informational or expository text. So make sure when you're reading these that you read everything. Read the bold headings. This tells you what the paragraph's going to be about. It's kind of like a preview. Here, read what's in the box. It's very important. So don't skip over something just because it's in a box. So that's a good reminder. Let's go back up to the top to our first passage. Here we go. And just a quick reminder of what we've talked about. Read each passage. Invest in each passage. It might be a different genre that you're going to have to work through one at a time. Look to find out which sections or selections, are paired. Think about how they're connected, how they're alike, how they're different while you read. Use your dictionary. If it's a word you don't know, look it up. You can't choose the right answer if you don't know what all the words in the question mean. So use your dictionary effectively. And always read actively. By that I mean don't fall asleep in the middle of the test. Read actively through each passage. Make notes. Your booklet is for writing in. If you need to make notes, underline, highlight, do all of those things and take your time. I want to wish you the best of luck. I know you'll do a great job. Thank you.